Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by One-Liner Jokes.
Oh, good.
My IQ test results came back
Let me guess. They were negative.
funny.
Why can't you trust an atom?
Oh, I know this one. Because they literally make up everything.
That is so true.
Let's get to the story.
And so Johnny Raymond and his organ bring to a close the first program of his new radio series. This is your announcer, James Van Dorn, saying goodnight to you all.
Gentlemen, please. Quiet. That's better. Now, Mr. Horton, you're the director of this show. Would you tell me in your own words exactly what happened when Van Dorn died?
Well, Inspector, it was toward the end of the program. Van Dorn reached for the button to put the studio off the air, and then he just gasped and fell to the floor.
I see. Where were the rest of you when this happened?
Well, Taylor and I were in the control room, and Johnny Raymond was at the organ.
Are you Taylor?
That's right. I'm the studio engineer.
Did you notice anything peculiar during the program?
No, sir. I was in the control room most of the time.
Most of the time.
Well, except for the few minutes when I went into the studio to check the equipment just before going on the air.
You noticed nothing out of the ordinary?
No, sir.
How about you, Raymond?
Well, I was at the organ singing during the whole show.
You didn't see anything either.
No, Mr. Van Dorn just pushed a button and then collapsed.
Let's take a look at this button. Yeah. Which one was it, Mr. Raymond?
Well, I wouldn't know. Kind of new around here.
It's this black one here, Inspector. It puts the studio off the air when you... Oh!
Yeah, what happened, Mr. Horton?
Well, I don't know. Something pierced my finger.
Pierced your finger? Here, let me see.
Oh,
Well, what do you know about this? What is that? Hey, look here. A little pin sticking out of this button.
A pin?
Yes, and that's not all. You see this stain on the lower half of this pin? If my guess is right, this pin's been dipped in poison.
But what does it mean?
It means that Van Dorn didn't just die, but was murdered.
Murdered?
But how?
Simple. When Van Dorn went to switch the studio off the air, he stuck his finger on the pin and died immediately.
Incredible.
But that means anyone could have slipped in here and put that pin there.
Hey, you're wrong there, Mr. Horton. It means that one of you three put that pin there.
One of us?
Yes, Horton.
Who?
You, Mr. Taylor. You're under arrest for the murder of James Van Dorn.
How did the inspector know it was Taylor who murdered Van Dorn? We'll give you the solution in just a moment. But first...
So what I want to know is why Orton isn't dead on the ground as well.
He did press the button.
Seems like a pretty big plot blunder to me.
Guys, maybe the poison dried up?
Or he simply wiped it off and there was none left.
Good point.
I think you're both wrong. I believe the whole lot of them were in on it, and they each built up a tolerance to the poison.
Wrong. You are an idiot.
I quite agree.
Well, I think it's my most enduring trait.
Of course you would.
And now for the solution.
I murdered Van Dorn. Why, you're crazy.
Am I? You said you went out to check all the equipment. If someone else had put the pin on that button, you would have noticed it.
Well, one of the others could...
No, Taylor. It couldn't have been Raymond or Horton. Raymond's new in the radio business and knew nothing about the board or anything else about this studio. Remember, This was his first radio show. If it had been Horton, he wouldn't have accidentally stuck his finger on it just now. No, Taylor. You were the only possible one. Now, you better get ready to march. We're going to headquarters.
You know, that still doesn't explain how Orton survived pressing that button.
I have a thought on that.
Oh, what's that?
Some of us learn from the mistakes of others.
Well, that makes sense.
The rest of us have to be the others.
For once, BG, I hear what you're saying.
What's that you said?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. On the show today, we have a review of a brand new audiobook featuring that web-crawling hero, Spiderman. Then we have a few stories sent in by you for you. We follow that with more stories from you in a special edition of Johnny, Is It True? We then end the show with a science fiction story from an unlikely place, The Mysterious Traveler. So what do you say we head to the Spider-Verse? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Audible has sponsored the show now since July of 2019. We have reviewed more than 140 audiobooks, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that Audible has over 200,000 books available? And a lot of those are included in the free catalog. Audible is amazing, and it is the perfect companion to Ron's Amazing Stories. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Audible. So what am I listening to? Untold Tales of Spider-Man by Stan Lee and narrated by David DeSantos. The wall-crawling crime fighter was introduced to the world in August of 1962, debuting in the anthology comic book Amazing Fantasy number 15. It, of course, was created by Stan Lee and artist Steve Ditko and was an instant sensation. For me, I've always been a fan, and I have read, listened, and watched everything there is. Or at least I thought I had. As it turns out, there's a whole bunch of stories that never made it to print, and this is 15 of them. Now, rather than me trying to introduce this audiobook, here is the introduction written by Stan himself and narrated by the very talented David DeSantos. I swear this could have been read by Stan himself. It's that good.
What a sensational idea! Just imagine the undiscovered bounty of thrills and surprises we're about to encounter as we recklessly plunge back to the early days of Spidey's supervillain smashing career, from shortly after Uncle Ben's death to a few months before Kraven the Hunter departed this mortal vale. When Steve Ditko and I started the icon-smashing saga of your friendly neighborhood web spinner way back in the early 60s, there was so much that we left out, so many other tales we could have chronicled. But at that time, we were a much smaller company, operating with a much smaller staff, and we didn't have the manpower to enable us to publish additional stories of Spidey's adventures each month. We had to select episodes that were only the tip of the legendary Spider-Man iceberg. But what a difference a few decades can make. Today, Marvel sits at the very pinnacle of comic bookdom, with a coterie of talented writers leaving no stone unturned and no computer keyboard untapped in their Herculean effort to bring you a spellbinding account of each and every adventure that has ever befallen our web-swinging wonder. After all, who are we to deny a breathlessly waiting world the indescribable pleasure of increasing its fund of knowledge about the planet's most popular costume cavorter? Thus, it is with a pardonable portion of pandemonious pride that I welcome you to the most eagerly awaited anthology since a treasury of Aunt May's favorite recipes. Indeed, when I first set eyes on the Marvel comic book title, Untold Tales of Spider-Man, written by the titanically talented Kurt Busiek, I knew that Marvel had once again come up with a concept to bring tears of gratitude streaming from the eyes of literature-loving fans everywhere. So, what could be more natural than for Kurt himself to join me in this momentous literary achievement by writing the retroduction to the book you now so gently hold and cherish? Who better to share the editorial credit of this watershed volume than the man who first opened the imaginative vault of Spidey's hitherto undiscovered tales? And what tales they are! Chronologically arranged so as not to shatter the authentic timeline of Spidey's career, you'll start with Will Murray's account of our hero teaming up with none other than the astonishing Ant-Man as they battle the ruthless Egghead. Then, before you can catch your breath, Marvel's ex-editor-in-chief and a chronicler of Spidey's current monthly adventures in The Amazing Spider-Man, Tom DeFalco, tells you of the first time one of Spider-Man's battles resulted in another man's death. Now the tales come at you fast and furious. Christopher Golden and Jose R. Nieto cook up an exotic concoction featuring the Human Torch, a gorgeous fashion model, and the sinister Sandman. Can you imagine Spidey unable to use his webbing because he ran out of polymer? What a time to be in the middle of a rampage with the deadly looter. Then, Michael Jan Friedman recounts how the Green Goblin decided to learn Spider-Man's true identity. The excitement never stops. A glimpse into Peter Parker's personal life comes from ex-Spider-Man editor Danny Fingeroth, as Peter must choose between continuing his wall-crawling career or caring for his ailing Aunt May. Then we get a story from Aunt May's perspective by John S. Drew, which deals with a move that changes our hero's life and the lives of those who love and hate him. We get even more personal as ex-Marvel staffer Ann Nocenti tells what happened after a stunned Peter Parker learned that his parents had been spies. Change of pace is provided by Ken Grobe and Stephen A. Roman as they tell of the time the son of Fancy Dan of the Enforcers was kidnapped, and only Spider-Man could help his avowed enemy. Our final three thrillers are equally compelling. Keith R.A. DeCandido pens a minor masterpiece about Dr. Octopus. Then, Eric Fine tells how J. Jonah Jameson wins a Humanitarian of the Year award, proving that anything's possible in New York. Finally, before you can catch your breath, Adam Troy Castro wraps everything up with the tale of Dr. Gwendolyn Harris, who encounters a peculiarly paranoid young man with super strength in the emergency room's psycho ward. This one involves scorpions, rhinos, octopuses, and a mysterious hunter. And that's just for starters. I'd better not tell you more, lest you think I'm resorting to hyperbole. Suffice it to say that over the years, Peter Parker has become a true flesh-and-blood human being to me, and, I'm delighted to say, to millions of others as well.
Well, I hope that gets your Spidey sense tingling. I have listened to 3 of the stories thus far, and I am completely hooked. What makes this an incredible experience is the narration. DeSantos is obviously a fan of the Spider-Man universe. Each story is told with the same vigor that the comic book brought to the table, and I'm pretty sure it's how Stan himself would have read them. And the stories? Well, they should have been comics. These are not leftover tales that nobody wanted to use. These are quality stories with a beginning, a middle, and of course, an end. They bring more background and texture to an already amazing Spider-Verse. Well, if that appeals to you in any way, head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can have the untold tales of Spider-Man for free. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook in 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This also gains you access to the included catalog, which is updated constantly with fresh new stuff. So, to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. You're not going to regret it, because these Spider-Man stories are nothing short of amazing. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for more of your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our first story this week comes from Garth Cody from Sandpoint, Alaska. Garth is a fisherman on the islands there. He says that his job by nature has a lot of downtime, and because of this, he gets to listen to a lot of podcasts and write stories. Here is a story that he wrote that his grandfather told him. My family has always been in the fishing industry. As many of you know, fishing in Alaska is a dangerous business. I myself have been injured more times than I can even count. But injuries are not the only issues. Exposure, bears, and even whales are of concern. I lost my best friend to a bear mauling just 2 years ago. The days are long and the nights are cold, but in the end, if you do your job well, you're set for the season. Now, not all the stories my grandfather told me were of these things. He once had an encounter with a UFO and swears today that this story is true. He was out crabbing on a large boat in the Bering Sea. The ship had a crew of 15 men. It was self-contained, meaning that when you shipped out, you might not return to shore for a week or more. He was on night watch, and fishing for the day had been completed. His job was to watch the wheel and alert the command crew of any danger to the ship. He was not certified to helm the big ship, but even in the 50s, ships were mostly automated. His job was to watch the sea and the skies for foul weather. A strange fog came in about 2 a.m. At first he thought to wake the officer on deck, but changed his mind when the fog stayed to the port side of the ship. It just hung there like a giant wall. The sea was calm, and there was a light breeze to the northeast. A violet light began to form in the mist. Over time, the light became brighter and better defined. It was in a distinct pattern of 3 lights forming a triangular shape. This time, he decided to alert command and reached for the ship's comm mic. That is the last thing he remembers. When he came to his senses, he looked at the time. It was 3:15 a.m. Over an hour had passed. The violet lights were gone, as was the fog. He didn't know what to do. If he reported the incident, they would just say he fell asleep, and that could affect his profits. He decided to note the fog and lights in the ship's log and was relieved at 4 a.m. The next day, his buddy Anok came to him and questioned him about the log entry. It turned out that he had had the same experience the night before, but had decided to keep it to himself. He had also lost an hour of time. I know this story lacks excitement, but when my grandfather tells it, you can feel and hear the fear that he keeps inside from that night. Garth Cody, Sandpoint, Alaska. Well, Garth, I don't know how the listeners will feel, but that story sent chills up and down my back. I'm not sure what I would have done. I can only imagine it in my head. Thank you for sharing it with us, and please thank your grandfather as well. Our second story comes from Patrick Walsh from Florida. Pat wrote, "Hello, Ron. Thank you for your show. We listen each week to find out what are Ron's amazing stories. I had to empty my mom's house to get it ready for a new renter. She had passed away suddenly, and we, the family, had decided to rent the place out. It was very hot and humid outside. A tropical storm was on the way. I checked the closets to make sure they were cleaned out and found that the living room coat closet was ice cold. However, the rest of the house was roasting hot. There was no reason for it, and I couldn't figure it out. It is a ranch-style house, and none of the plumbing ran anywhere near that closet. I was just about to leave the house when I heard the closet door open and then slam shut. I left the house that day at a brisk pace. We took care of this house for 2 years after my mother passed, and I always hated going there by myself. Both my sisters agreed and claimed to have seen some pretty strange things there, too. We had many problems with the renters complaining about this noise or that breaking for no apparent reason. Things got so bad with the renters that we decided to sell the house and wash our hands of it. At this point, I should tell you my parents lived in that home for more than 20 years and never had a single issue. My youngest sister lived there for some time during some of those years and could not remember a single event as well." Patrick Walsh, Florida. Well, Patrick, that is just one of those things. I guess I would ask about your mom and if she could still be in the home, or if there was something there held in check by her presence. Who can say, but that is an amazing story. Thank you, Patrick.
Johnny, is this true?
As you know by now, I like to surf the internet to find the strange and unusual. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, I would do it anyway, even if there was no podcast. What you're about to hear is...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Your job is to decide. Let's get started.
Johnny, is this true?
This time on Johnny, Is It True? I have something new. We get a lot of stories from you guys, but the fact is some are too short or just don't fit. What I'm going to do is read some of these, and you have to decide if it was really from a listener or did I make it up. Let's get started. Story 1. I failed the first quarter of a class, so I made a fake report card. I did this every quarter that year. I forgot that they mail home the end-of-year cards, and my mom got to it before I could intercept it with my fake one. She was very angry at the school for their error. The teacher had also retired that year and had already thrown out his records, so they had to take my mom's proof using the fake report cards that I had made and correct the mistake. I've never told anyone the truth until now. Well, was that the truth? It was, and it was sent in by Janet Weismiller from Oklahoma. I hope your mom doesn't listen to the podcast. Story 2. Real short one here. Hey, Ron, I heard you talking about ghosts. I have one in my house that keeps chasing the cat. How do I know? My cat keeps looking up and hissing at nothing. Do you believe me? Well, what's not to believe? Jason Barrett sent that short in from Portland, Oregon. Story 3. This one is called, I Swear to God He Levitated. I have a friend who I've known since I was very little. One day when we were about 6, I was at his house when he suddenly got this absolutely god-awful stomach pain. I mean, he was literally writhing in pain. So his mom took him to the doctor. He took one look at him and told her to take him immediately to the ER. About halfway to the hospital, my friend suddenly let rip the loudest, most powerful flatulent any of us had ever heard. I swear to God he levitated. After a good 30 seconds of intense noise, he looked at his mom and said, I feel all better now. I'm glad he did, but did this happen? It did. This one was sent in by Bob Smithers from New York. Quite the explosive tale. Well, yep, all 3 of them were true, and I hope you enjoyed this very short, Johnny, is it true? Our featured story for this week is a true classic 1950s style science fiction story. It comes from the OTR series Mysterious Traveler, which, by the way, is one of my all-time favorites. Mysterious Traveler was not known for its science fiction. In fact, it mostly played fantasy, straight crime dramas, mysteries, and suspense. It was written and directed by Robert Arthur and David Kogan, and it began on the Mutual Broadcasting System in December of 1943. It may interest you to know that many of the elements of Ron's amazing stories have come from the mind of David Kogan and his show. I'll let you see if you can find them. Our story today is called The Planet Zevius. A ship is on a mission to explore the universe, and the result is not what you might expect. It first aired on May 13th, 1950.
Transcribed. The Mutual Broadcasting System presents The Mysterious Traveler. Written, produced, and directed by Robert A. Arthur and David Kogan, and starring 2 of radio's foremost actors, Ralph Bell and Brett Morrison, in The Planet Zevius.
This is the Mysterious Traveler, inviting you to join me on another journey into the realm of the strange and the terrifying. I hope you will enjoy the trip, that it will thrill you a little and chill you a little. So settle back, get a good grip on your nerves, and be comfortable, if you can, as I retell a story which so many listeners have asked to hear again. It's the story I call The Planet Zevius. Our story begins in a large, darkened laboratory filled with intricate machinery and instruments. A half-dozen engineers are seated before control panels which run the length of the laboratory, while 2 small, slender men stand in the middle of the room looking up at a large screen. A screen which reveals the celestial heavens to them. The 2 men follow closely, anxiously, the movement of a pinpoint light across the screen.
Signal's coming in much stronger, Commander.
Yes. The ship is approaching the stratosphere. I think that this time we've succeeded.
Let's hope it all goes well in the landing.
Yes, we've waited so long for success. Pay close attention to the controls, men. The IPX-4 will soon enter the stratosphere. Prepare to land it.
Pardon me. Commander Destro?
Yes, what is it?
My name is Vidray. I've been assigned by the Scientific Council to act as historian for the work you're engaged in.
I see. Well, you come at a most momentous time, Vidray. If you look at the screen above us, you'll see history in the making. Oh, allow me to introduce Professor Capaccio, our chief scientist.
How do you do, sir?
I'm happy to meet you.
You were saying, Commander, that history was being made this very moment?
Yes. You see that small pinpoint of light on the tetrascreen?
Pinpoint of light? Oh, yes, I see it.
That is the IPX-4, Interplanet Experimental Ship number 4.
This year will go down in history as an epoch-making year.
You mean that you actually succeeded?
Excuse me. The IPX-4's entered the stratosphere. Attention, Master Control. Prepare to land the IPX-4. Switch on retarding jet number 1.
Switch on retarding jet number 1.
Switch on retarding jet number 2.
Switch on retarding jet number 2.
Instrument reading.
Speed, 1,200 miles per hour. Altitude, 60,000 feet. 900, 40,000. 700, 30,000. 500, 20,000. 300, 10,000. Speed, 100 miles per hour. Altitude, 2,000 feet.
Signal base crew to stand by.
Base crew signal to stand by.
Instrument reading.
Hovering 500 feet. 300. 100. Flight completed.
The IPX-4 has landed, gentlemen. And with it, a new era has begun. An era in which we shall travel through the entire solar system to other planets.
You finally succeeded.
Yes.
And the crew, they came through without any injuries or ill effects?
The entire flight was controlled by us from this laboratory. The only crew we had on that ship were animals.
The animals are alive and well. The flight vision screen aboard the ship permitted us to see and hear them every moment of the flight.
Now there remains but the final step.
A flight with human beings as the crew?
Yes. We shall start to prepare for it immediately.
Ready for flight, sir. The crew are at their stations.
Thank you. Professor, why don't you show our young friend through the ship while I have a last-minute conference with my officers?
Of course, Commander. Come along, Vidray. You'll be more than interested.
Well, thank you. I should like to see the rest of the ship.
Well, as you probably gathered, this is the fuel room.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the deck below are the nuclear propulsion engines. Watch your head.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is the crew's quarters. And beneath it are storage quarters for ship supplies and equipment.
It's strange, Professor, but from the outside, the IPX-4 seems so much larger than from in here.
Well, that's easy enough to explain, Vidray. You see, the IPX-4 is a hull within a hull, and this is the inner hull.
Oh, I see. And it's the outer hull that protects us.
Yes. To break through the field of gravitation of this planet, we must achieve a speed of 20,000 miles per hour. At that speed, friction creates great heat on the outer hull. Heat which we, fortunately, won't feel in this hull.
I understand. Is this the control room?
Yes. Now, don't be overawed by these hundreds of controls and instruments. In time, you'll come to understand them all.
That large screen, is that the eye of the ship?
Yes. Once we're in flight, what lies before us is projected on the screen.
Stand by, Zolf, for flight orders.
Yes, sir. Stand by for flight orders.
Well, gentlemen, the moment has arrived. Sound warning signal.
Sound warning signal.
Switch on flight vision screen.
Switch on flight vision screen.
Establish contact with base.
Establish contact with base.
Cut in nuclear jet number 1.
Cut in nuclear jet number 1.
We're taking off, Vidray.
Cut in nuclear jet number 2.
Cut in nuclear jet number 2.
Instrument reading.
Rate of flight, 500 miles per hour. Altitude, 1,000 feet. Rate of flight, 2,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 150,000 feet.
Don't worry if you start to black out, Vidray. It's to be expected. The crew is conditioned for it.
Rate of flight, 5,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 140,000 feet. Rate of flight, 10,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 300,000 feet.
This is a crucial moment, Vidray.
Rate of flight, 11,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 500,000 feet. Rate of flight, 13,000 miles per hour. Altitude, 700,000 feet.
Hear that surge, Professor? We've broken through. We're in space.
Yes.
Rate of flight, 24,000 miles per hour. Flight distance covered, 2,000 miles.
We've made it, Professor. With each minute of flight, our speed accelerates.
Yes. We should soon reach our maximum speed of 50,000 miles per hour.
Rate of flight, 30,000 miles per hour. Flight distance covered, 3,000 miles.
Take over, Zal.
Yes, sir.
What's the matter with Vidray? Did he black out?
Yes. He wasn't conditioned for the flight.
Oh, he'll be all right in a few minutes. When he is, bring him into the chart room. I'll be plotting our course. Come in, Vidray, Professor. How do you feel, Vidray?
I'm all right now, sir.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
I've just been plotting our course to the planet Zevius.
Zevius, sir? Why Zevius? It isn't the nearest planet.
Well, that's quite true, Vidray. But through the use of a spectrometer, we've been able to determine that Zevius can support human life. The composition of the air on that planet isn't much different from our own. The air of our planet contains 22.8% oxygen and 77% nitrogen, and traces of other gases.
And Zevius?
On Zevius, the oxygen content is 20.5%, a little less than our own. The nitrogen content is 79%. Well, we shouldn't have too much difficulty breathing on Zevius.
I'm afraid I'm not too familiar with Zevius. How does it compare with our planet in other respects?
Well, 3/4 of Zevius seems to be water. The land is divided into two continents.
Very much like our own planet.
Yes. The circumference is approximately 28,000 miles.
300 years ago, our astronomers noted huge explosions on Zevius. For a time, they thought it was disintegrating. But it didn't.
Yes, and since those huge explosions 300 years ago, there have been no additional ones.
Professor, do you think there might be human life on Zevius?
Oh, it's quite possible, Vidray.
We should reach Zevius in 60 days. Perhaps then, Vidray, we shall have the answer. Stand by to land on Zevius.
Attention, crew members. Stand by to land on Zevius.
We're approaching Zevius already. It's exerting a strong pull toward its surface.
Yes.
Switch on radar sender.
Switch on radar sender.
Our radar signals are reaching Zevius and being reflected back off its surface. As we get closer, the speed of the signal will accelerate.
I see.
Cut nuclear jet number 2.
Cut nuclear jet number 2.
Cut nuclear jet number 1.
Cut nuclear jet number 1. How quiet it is. Seems strange not to hear the engines after 61 days.
Instrument reading.
Rate of descent, 500 miles per hour. Approaching stratosphere. Altitude, 400,000 feet. Rate of descent, 600 miles. Altitude, 300,000 feet.
Our speed is increasing.
Why?
We're in Zevius orbit. Gravity is pulling us down toward it.
Switch on retarding jet number 1.
Switch on retarding jet number 1.
Instrument reading.
Rate of descent, 400 miles per hour. Altitude, 200,000 feet. Professor, look. You can clearly make out Zevius' surface now.
300 miles.
Yes.
Altitude.
We're near the coast of one of the continents. That small silvery thread is a river flowing into the sea.
100 miles
How
per hour.
green it is.
Altitude.
Zevius has plant life, just like our own planet.
Yes. That river's quite a large one. Far larger than any we have.
Covering only 50,000 feet.
Commander's evidently going to land near that mountain overlooking the river.
Rather hilly country.
Yes.
800.
Too bad. Darkness is falling.
600. 400. 200. 100. Flight completed. We've landed.
Cut retarding jet number 1.
Cut retarding jet number 1.
Cut radar sender.
Cut radar sender.
Well, gentlemen, we've done it. Flown 80 million miles from our own planet to Zevius.
Congratulations, Commander.
Thank you. Well, it's already grown dark. We'll wait until morning before leaving the ship. Meanwhile, Professor, I suggest you make extensive tests of the air on Zevius. We can't be too careful.
Quite agree. I'll proceed at once, Commander. You'll have a full report by morning.
Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Well, I've made a thorough analysis of the air, Commander, and it substantiates our earlier findings.
In other words, we can live out there.
Yes. Well, we may find ourselves a little short of breath now and then due to less oxygen, and we're used to it. It's perfectly safe.
Good. I'll give orders to have the nuclear copter assembled for flight. The three of us will make an exploratory trip over this area. Be prepared to leave in exactly 1 hour. We're ready for takeoff. I suggest you fasten your safety belts, gentlemen.
I'm ready.
Stand clear. We'll rise straight up and have a look around.
Look. We're high enough now to see the river. It's enormous.
Yes. I should estimate it to be at least, a mile in width. Seems to flow into that bay and then out to sea.
Professor, look. To your left, across the river.
What are you pointing to? All I see are trees and greenery.
Well, wait till we rise a little higher. Yes. That greenery is growing on top of immense ruins. You see them, don't you, Commander?
Yes, I think you're right, Pedro. Apparently it's an island. Yes, it is. Let's fly over and have a look.
The island itself doesn't seem to be very large. Oh, yes, I see the ruins now. And they're barely discernible under the growth of trees and grass that covers it.
Well, where are you going to land, Commander?
We'll put down on that huge ruin directly ahead. From it, we'll have a good view of the entire island.
These ruins are truly amazing, Commander. Thousands and thousands of buildings and dwellings covered by trees and grass. These are the ruins of a great civilization.
How old would you estimate these ruins to be, Professor?
From a rather hasty study of the plant life that's grown over it, I should say approximately, 300 years.
300 years. Do you think those huge explosions our astronomers saw on this planet 300 years ago might have wiped out this civilization?
That's quite possible, Commander. Where's Vidre gotten to? Oh, there he is. Oh, Vidre! Don't get too near the edge. You may fall over.
I'm being quite careful, Professor. I just wanted to see what was below us. This ruin we're standing on must have been a huge building leveled by some great force. If you look over the edge, you'll see that it slopes down to what seems to be streets.
Streets?
Yes, very much like those on our own planet. It would be quite possible for us to make our way down the side of this ruin to the bottom. Can't be more than 200 feet.
What do you think, Professor?
Why not? By all means, let's descend and have a look around.
Well, we only have a few more feet. Watch your footing here. These rocks keep giving way beneath me.
Yes. It'd be quite easy to break a leg here. You all right, Professor?
Yes, Commander.
Well, here we are. Oh, it seems as though we've descended 1,000 feet instead of only 200.
Yes. It's rather dark down here. Everything's in shadows.
Yes, you were quite right, Vidre. Beneath this rubble we're standing on, there seems to be a paved street.
Let's have a look around, shall we?
Look at those ruins. They seem to have been huge buildings.
Yes. If I may judge, they must have been 7, 8, perhaps 1,000 feet high.
Apparently, this civilization was almost as highly developed as ours before it was destroyed.
Yes.
Professor, do you think it's possible that there may be descendants of the people who built this civilization?
It's possible, of course, but as yet I've seen no signs of them.
Look, there's a building which hasn't been entirely destroyed. Let's have a look inside.
Yes, by all means. Perhaps we'll discover objects that will give us more information about the race that once lived here.
How huge that entrance is.
It looks quite dark in there.
Unfortunately, I have a small torch. Come along.
Look at the size of this chamber. Why, the ceiling is at least 40 feet high.
Professor, this building must have been an institution, a library. Look at the thousands of books lying on the floor, simply rotting away.
Yes, you're right.
Look at this book, Professor. It's about twice the size of our own.
Yes. It's too bad it's been exposed to the elements. Pages are yellow. The printing is all but faded.
Here's another one on the floor. It's a much larger book and bound in some sort of animal skin.
Let me see it. Yes, this is in much better condition. We shall take it back to the ship, Ridley. See if one of our scientists can decipher the language it's printed in.
Professor, would you come here for a minute?
Oh, yes, of course.
Look. These ashes on the floor. Looks like the remains of a fire.
Yes, you're right. It appears to be only a few weeks old.
A few weeks old? Then that means...
Yes. There were survivors of the Holocaust that destroyed this civilization.
Their descendants may be here, in these ruins, watching us.
That's quite possible. However, we're armed.
I wonder what they look like.
Perhaps after a time when they get used to the sight of us, they'll show themselves.
Yes.
What was that?
Sounds like a signal of some sort.
Yes, you're right. I suggest we leave, Commander.
Yes, come along.
It feels good to get out of that dark chamber. There it is again. Only much closer.
There's no need to get alarmed, Vidra.
If we only knew what they look like.
I dare say we frighten them as much as they do us.
I think we're being followed. I saw a huge figure back there slipping from one ruin to another.
Oh, nonsense, Vidra. It's your imagining. Yes, I think you're right. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of someone behind us, too.
We're almost at the foot of the ruin which we descended. We haven't much further to go.
Perhaps we ought to fire our weapons as a warning.
No. They'd surely take it as a threatening gesture. We don't want to do that.
Yes, well, here we are. Let's not waste any time climbing to the top.
Yes, they still seem to be following. Now and then I can make out a shadowy figure.
It's almost impossible to tell what they look like. They cling to the shadows.
They seem enormous. Much larger than ourselves.
Mustn't let your imagination run away with you.
It's amazing how much faster we're going up than when we came down. We're almost at the top.
I have a feeling they won't try to climb this ruin after us. Evidently, they don't like daylight. Here we are.
Professor, look out!
It was close. What was it?
They threw some sort of weapon at you. It's something but a long, round pole with a sharp piece of metal on the end.
It's a spear. We have them in our museums. It's the weapon of a primitive tribe.
Then they must be little more than savages.
Yes. And I don't think they'll come after us, but I suggest we take off and return to the ship.
Zal?
Yes, sir?
I don't expect any trouble, but turn on the radar system for protection. If anyone approaches the ship, the alarm will go off.
Yes, sir.
Why are you so fascinated by that spear, Vidray? You've been examining it for 10 minutes now.
But it's just that... Well, it's an enigma, Commander. We find the ruins of a great civilization. Huge buildings, dwellings, streets. A city that must have had 4 or 5 million people. What happened to them?
We can only surmise, Vidray. Perhaps it was a violent quake, a gigantic tidal wave, or some other huge force that all but wiped them out.
And this spear... Could it have been hurled by a descendant of that great race that built all that?
Yes, it's quite likely.
But look at this spear. The man who threw it was little more than a savage.
Perhaps the wheel of evolution has slowly turned to its starting point. It's difficult to say.
The alarm.
Someone's broken through the radar station.
All crew members, attention. Report to station.
Switch on radar screen.
Switch on radar screen.
It's too bad night has fallen. Screen reveals nothing but shadowy trees.
Yes.
What's that?
Sounds very much like spears bouncing off the hull.
Yes, we're being attacked. One of those spears can certainly do us no harm.
Commander, look at the radar screen.
It's a huge figure. It's hard to make out. He's carrying a burning torch.
Yes. South. Yes, sir. If that figure carrying that torch attempts to approach, fire on him with a ray beam.
Yes, sir. Look, he's running towards us.
Yes, he's out to set the ship on fire.
Look how huge he is. He's simply gigantic.
Yes, sure is.
Salt, fire.
Yes, sir. He's down. Only a few yards from the ship.
Yes. He doesn't seem to be dead. I can see him moving.
A burst from a ray beam would have killed any of us. It only seems to have wounded him. Salt.
Yes, sir.
Order a party of 6 men to go out and bring that monster in here.
Yes, sir, at once. They're bringing him in now, Commander.
Yes. Bring him over here, man. He's much too big for the bed. All right, lie him down on the floor. Good. That's it.
He's dying. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do for him. He's trying to say something. If we only knew his language.
Professor.
He's dead.
Too bad. Sorry we had to fire on him. I was hoping we could establish friendly relations with the people of Zevius.
Look at the size of him. He's gigantic. Even larger than I thought.
Yes. He must measure at least here. Let me see.
Professor, the leather-bound book you found in the ruins. I've succeeded in deciphering the language. I've already translated the first 2 pages.
Be patient a moment, Ledro. I want to finish my examination of this man of Zevius. It's amazing. Simply amazing.
This book you found is apparently the key to their civilization. As soon as I've translated the rest of it, I'm sure we'll have
This man of Zevius, I should say, he weighs at least 200 pounds. And as for his height, he's at least 6'1".
6'1"?
Why, that would make him almost twice as tall as we are.
Yes. But that isn't all. He only has 5 fingers.
5 fingers? Are you sure?
Positive.
Please, sir, I wish you'd let me read you the translation of the book you found in the ruins.
Oh, yes, Ledro. By all means. Go ahead.
Well, I've translated only the first 2 pages. It begins this way. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was a desolate waste, with darkness covering the abyss, and a tempestuous wind raging over the surface of the waters. It's evident, sir, that this planet we know as Zevius was called Earth by the race that wrote this book.
Earth. I wonder what happened to the people of Earth that brought their civilization to an end.
mysterious traveler again. Did you enjoy our little visit to the Planet Zevius, or better known to us as Earth? What's that, madam? You don't like the thought of civilization being destroyed?
Well, fortunately, it doesn't have to happen. Not if we don't want it to. Oh, by the way, all names of characters in this story were fictitious, and any resemblance to the names of actual persons is strictly out of this world. And, oh, you have to get off here. I'm sorry. But I'm sure we'll meet again. I take this same train every week at this same time.
You have just heard The Mysterious Traveler with Maurice Tarplin in the title role. Others in our cast were Ralph Bell, Larry Haynes, and Lawson Zerby. All characters in this story were fictitious. Any resemblance to the names of actual persons living or dead was purely coincidental. Original music composed and played by Al Finelli. Bill Tompkins speaking. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Okay, so we have another tale that dooms our planet to an apocalypse. It's funny how these stories were as popular in the 50s as they are today. It makes you wonder if it's truly our fate or not. I guess only time will tell. Our story today starred Maurice Tarplin, who was popular during the golden age of radio. Some of the shows he appeared on were The Strange Dr. Weird. We've played a few of those. Boston Blackie, The Shadow, Theater 5, The March of Time as Winston Churchill, Gangbusters, and various soap operas. He was also in several episodes of Tom Corbett, Space Cadet. We've also played a few of those. In his later years, Tarplin did voiceovers for TV commercials and worked the English language soundtracks for foreign films. That's a tough job if you really think about it. He wrote several novels and was active until his death in 1975. He truly was one of the greats of old-time radio. That was episode number 605, and my thanks go out to Janet Weismiller, Jason Barrett, and Bob Smithers for contributing to Johnny Is It True. I also want to thank all of you for listening today. It means everything. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button helps us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.